Good evening and welcome back to a special edition, a Thanksgiving edition of Beyond the Backstage Pass. I'm your host, Vince Edwards from Sound Image Productions. You may also know me from a couple closed Facebook groups we have for roadies called Death by Loadout and the Backstage Pass. To my right is my good friend and co-host, Kyle Thomas. How you doing, brother?
Not too bad. Another day, another dog biscuit.
Man, they just keep handing out those dog biscuits because you're that good.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
just because you're that good.
How you been? You look all bright and exuberant today.
Oh, man, finally got some rest after our we were going pretty hard at it for a few weeks there straight, trying to pull together the benefit,
You
the
sure
Big
were.
Love benefit concert, and now it's an editing process right now. So a lot of different heads: Mikey, Gregory Price, Mike Brown, myself, and some others. Of course, Rick Allen and Lauren Monroe are trying to cut it together. So it's special. And
It
it's
was
something.
nice to see your wife.
Yes, my wife came in and saw the show, and she's always a treat. She brings a little bit of light with her, and I love her like crazy. So, and she enjoyed her time, and Mitch in particular, that it was nice seeing you.
Oh yeah.
And so
It's always a pleasure.
she's a treat. She's a sweet, sweet woman, and I'm a lucky, lucky man. What's going on in your world, brother?
Man, I am just ecstatic about having Thanksgiving come up. I just wanted to say I'm very grateful to be a part of this family, and Sound Image has been very nice to me, and I just wanted to say I'm very appreciative of you and your brother, George. I don't know where I'd be if I was doing
Jail.
something else. Probably jail.
Jail.
No.
But that's
But,
a whole other subject. But
It's it's great to be staying active and staying busy doing what I love. So I appreciate you guys.
I couldn't listen, man. You've earned anything that you get from here from us. It's through hard work. It's through kindness, professionalism, being an incredible employee, a good friend. You've been, really good for the show. I enjoy doing this a great deal with you. I am equally grateful for having you. And I struggle with mushy and being too sentimental, but I guess it's that day where we talk about these types of things.
Happy Thanksgiving, dude.
Oh, baby. I hope you have a good eat tonight. And that all of our friends out there in TV land are also having a nice time with their people, and, that everything's going well for them. We appreciate them tuning in, and that we're gonna give them a little bit of a show. As it talks about being grateful, we have a special treat tonight. A gentleman on the show, a good friend of yours, a friend of the shop, a friend of the house. Works with Sound Image Southern California, works wherever they'll have him because he's just that good. Everybody's trying to take and collect him up. He's done everything from running Prairie Sun Studios, which is a remarkable place. I've had the luxury of doing a couple albums up there. He's worked with some really large acts like DaBaby, Cypress Hill, Wu-Tang Clan, Arrested Development, E40, tons of Emerald Cups. He's a festival guy. He's the guy if you need somebody to come in and kick ass. You call up the one and only Travis Strain. Travis, how you doing, my brother?
Good. How you guys doing?
Oh man,
Good,
it's
man.
Thanksgiving. We got you on the show. We're happy. We're thankful. Thank you for coming on. How you been treating yourself? How's life been treating you?
It's been good. I mean, crazy year as we all know, but still a lot to be grateful for. But hanging in there, trying to keep what work I can coming in the door. But could be worse.
It could be worse. Let's we're big on the origin story around here. And you have your origin story goes along a kind of a familiar path. I know you started out, maybe it's not fair to say started out, but I know you definitely cut your teeth a little bit in the church front of house, running front of house at a church. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. I had a church my parents went to, and I'd played music since I was a kid, and thing that got me sort of into sound and into that gig was I had a recording experience that was just awful, and I was like, okay, I can probably figure out this engineering thing, and that led to like looking into more of that. And there was an opening at the church, and the guy was like, yeah, I can train you, no problem. And I think I did that for like a year and a half. It was like into high school. Definitely like sort of just thrown into it. It was one of those, oh yeah, the old guy is going to show you for like a month and a half of services what the deal is. He was there for one, and then it was like, all right, kid, have fun.
You were in the fire.
But,
They put
it's
you in the fire.
great way to learn it. So.
It really is. There's a lot to be said for that. Not always doesn't feel the most comfortable, but there's some learning to be had, and you can kind of chart your own path that way too.
Oh yeah.
Influences and mentors definitely have their place, but sometimes there's a lot to be said for cutting your own way and breaking out the machete and kind of going through there and carving your own path.
Hey, you always mention this little console you had that was like super basic, just one gain knob with a couple
Oh
of
yeah, that
things.
was not for the church, but like me and my brothers, like growing up playing music, had our own little PA, and I want to say it was a Tabco
It's like an
mixer,
all-tech replica.
and it had level, wasn't even like separate gain and fader. It was level, treble, and bass, and it was like a inch deep, but it like rack mounted, and it was all vertical. And like from what I'm told, like when that was one of the like original mixers, there were bands out there that would stack like 6 of them up,
Right.
and they'd feed into each other. But I mean, for us as kids, it was a great little setup because it was like we could do just either music through it, or like it was like you'd throw like kick, bass, and guitar and a vocal in it. And we had these like homemade speaker cabinets that we'd bought off like one of my little brother's guitar teachers or something, and it was just some big 15 and a horn with straight chicken wire as the grill.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I mean, it was great because we were the kids with the PA, so it was like bring it out to whatever party, little shows, and like that was probably the first sound I did, was like owning that thing.
Yeah.
Down the rabbit hole from there.
Yeah, no, exactly. It kind of got in your bloodstream. And
Yeah.
yeah, I totally understand. Our story is not much different. There's a lot of realistic, Radio Shack stuff you cobbled together, and went out and did it with the punk rock scene in the garages and backyards of the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
it went from there. I know. So this is East Coast living. No, this is Texas.
Texas. Yeah.
Texas.
Yeah, just outside San Antonio.
Yeah. The big state. And then I know you moved to NorCal and you took an internship at Prairie Sun Recording Studio. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I did, I guess it's a 3-month program there. And I had gone to school before that, did a little bit of the recording arts and music business. And the whole time I was in school, I kept sort of picking up live work, even though I was, looking at the studio stuff for the school. And yeah, found Prairie Sun through, I don't know, someone else. I think it was just another reference of someone I'd been talking to in California. And it was, there's tons of great studios in the Bay Area. And the thing that sort of drew me there was like, they've got 2 vintage Neves, they've got the SSL. But yeah, and, got to do a little bit of live sound stuff there. So it was just another place I kept finding myself, diving into the live end. But a lot of great experience. I mean, they have guys like Oz Fritz up there engineering, and just like all sorts of, bands have come through there over the years. I think,
It's
Tom
been
Waits
quite-
had a huge
that's
10-year run there, and there's
Yeah,
a
no,
lot of
it's-
interesting. Primus has done a lot up there over the
That's
years.
right.
So.
Vinny, didn't you go out with Eddie Muddy up there?
We went.
Eddie
Eddie
and
Money
the
was a
Tide.
producer on this, and Eddie and the Tide was the band. It was an Atlantic Records thing.
That's right.
And at that point, that was where we landed and spent, I want to say, 8 days,
Nice.
and it was quite the experience. We busted out a whole album on it, and I have very fond memories of Prairie
Yeah, I
Sun.
mean, it's a very unique place,
It
being in
is
the
a-
old barns,
yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
like having the option to lodge up there. It's like, but it's cool. It's a little getaway. Like even if you're in the Bay Area,
Fully off the beaten path, but still close enough to the Bay Area where you could kind of,
Yeah.
after your couple of good recording sessions, you want to go out in nightlife. You get in the car, post everybody into a van, and go out and be obnoxious in the city, and next morning
Totally.
come back and get back into the recording of a thing. Yeah, it's a special place. I know, rolling up into the shows, we were trying to have you on a couple times in the past, and you were busy. You were out. You had been doing some work, saying kind of the COVID audio stuff with, in the sense, what I mean by that is you were out at Bradley Ranch, if I remember correctly.
yeah, Bradley Ranch and the Alameda Fairgrounds. In,
Right. And was this
Pleasanton.
with the shows with the people in the cars, or socially distanced? What was the deal with it?
Yeah, so it was like socially distanced with the cars. So what they did is they spaced out the cars, and everyone would get little area sort of around their car, so they were free to bring chairs and stuff like that. So you could stay in your area, and it was nice because we were doing PA and FM broadcast.
Oh,
still.
perfect,
So
yeah.
it's like if you had
Yeah.
people that wanted to stay in their car, it felt like they were more sensitive, or like some of them back in the summer, and then a few we've just had recently, we've had either extreme heat or extreme like cold and even some rain. So it's like having both, just sort of works out to where it's like they can do the FM, they can do the live, but it definitely seems to like really hit people differently having that live PA. So
Oh yeah, I was struggling to imagine just the FM version of it.
Yeah.
And then of course all the cacophony kind of walking through that, imagining the different delay issues and
Oh yeah.
and just struggling with it. So I thought that the approach that you guys took at it made a lot of sense, and probably made the experience much more enjoyable for you and for the
Oh
audience.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like engineering it would have been a whole other trip. I've talked to a few guys who've been mixing only the FM, and they're not even out in the audience. You know, they're
Yeah.
backstage, basically mixing in a broadcast style booth,
Right.
which makes sense since it's FM. But it's like you totally get taken out of that element of just the adrenaline of the show.
Yeah,
so-
it's kind of missing
Very
almost
different
completely.
vibe.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of us live for that part of it. That's part of the pay for us, you know, the pay package. So I know you. So I had to research this a little bit. It's funny. The day I heard that you were out doing this, I was talking to my good friend Kyle Thomas, who's a good friend of yours, and we were talking about you and getting you in here. This must have been a couple months back or more, and I was just received the mail. It's the oddest coincidence. And we get a bunch of magazines here, you know,
Right.
a lot of trade magazines, and then the entertainment ones, Rolling Stone and so on. And I'm sorting out the stuff to the magazine table that we have where there's all those mags. And we're talking about you, and he says, well, you know, he's doing the baby thing. He's out touring with the baby. And so I, of course, being me, I kind of made fun of the name of the baby because I'm not, you know, up with all this. And
Yeah.
as I'm doing it, I set down the Rolling Stones, and the baby's on the cover of Rolling Stones.
Nice.
And he went, yeah, you eat your words now, buddy. You know, like he's a big friggin' deal.
Yeah.
So what was your experience like without doing Sound for the Baby?
It was definitely like a huge step up. I mean, the funny thing going into that is that I had a very similar experience as far as getting hired for the gig. It was like, oh yeah, we're gonna fly you out, like
Yeah.
just rapper to baby, whatever. Like I think I looked up one song, was like, cool, whatever, like, you know, might be fun.
Sure.
And get out there and find out he's like one of the biggest things in that scene.
Yeah, killing it.
And I mean, you know, it's not a band. It's not the super hands-on like that. But I mean, dude puts on a killer show, like understands the good production. And, you know, I've done a decent amount of rap and hip hop over the years. And I mean, the thing that's always, you know, made the difference to me in those shows is like actually having the vocal. Because I mean, that's the main element, is like actually having that vocal sit right there on top and be clear. So it was definitely a very like, make that vocal pop. And, you know, you got the arenas that are different every time.
That's right.
So it was a good experience, though. I mean, it was a quick run, and it was great to get that in, like, before everything shut down. So
Yeah, you were right up at the cusp. I mean, you went
yeah, I think
right
we
up to
were
the wire,
right up
right?
till-
I think you might have actually went a little bit into the, because I heard some reports that he might have got rolled up a little bit for doing some
he did
club
some stuff on his
performances.
own, yeah, after we wrapped
Yeah,
up tour,
that
and they
were
weren't flying
foreboding.
production for that. And it's
Yeah,
definitely been interesting, but, you know, we're hoping next year or
yeah, fingers
whenever that
crossed.
we'll get back out.
Absolutely. Let me ask you: is there any special challenges, or what is when you know mixing somebody like the baby? How are you making your mic choices?
I mean, I've done, like I said, I've done rap a lot, and I mean, my go-to in the festival scenario and all that has always been the Beta 58. You know, you get a little more hype overall. It gets a little better with the cupping, and
Yeah.
and you usually get a little more SPL out of it than you do with like a regular 58.
Sure.
But I've been playing with the KSM8 over
Great
the
mic.
last couple years, and I had that available, and it just sort of seemed like the perfect sort of fit. And it's, I mean, it's really nice because it's like you get the high quality of the 9, but it's a little more contained, a little tighter pickup. And it's just, it can take stupid SPL to it. It seems to do really well with the cupping. And I mean, surprisingly, the baby isn't horrible with it. Like we had some of these openers, I'd come out and watch the other tech mix it, and it was just like a nightmare watching
Stop
that.
cupping the mic. What the?
But yeah, with him and his DJ, it was like it made it so much easier just to have them sit right on top.
That's great.
So yeah.
Cool. I know you have a preference for. I know you can work. You know the Avid product, the SSL product, but I know you got an affinity for the Digico product. Talk to me about that. Just
Digico
the topography, workflow. What is?
Yeah, it's really the workflow. I mean, Avid was probably the first like large format desk I was on, but then I quickly got introduced to Digico in the early years at Prairie Sun, and it was just super customizable, and you get into some of these bigger shows and specific situations, either on tour or on festivals, where you need to access certain things a very specific way. And some of these older desks or different manufacturers, it's like super capable, but you're locked into sort of their way of doing it.
Yeah.
And the more and more I've gotten to the Digico, it's like it really lets me customize for the show I'm on. And then just the sound quality, especially when it came out, just is phenomenal. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have caught up recently. But for me, it's like I know that I'm getting a super clean, very reliable sound. And in my experience, they have some of the best like development and customer support, because what they've put out over the years, it's like they listen to the customers.
Yes.
And you can get them
Very
as far as
important.
tech support. They're the easiest company I've ever dealt with. So
Really?
I mean, my experience is they have 2 or 3 guys that handle the U.S. tech support.
Yeah.
And it's literally their cell phone is what you call
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
not
You
sitting
call
there
them
sitting
direct.
on hold for hours and that was a big part of it, being able to, I mean, it's a reliable desk, so you're not calling them a ton, but it's like being able to have that, like, oh, hey, this weird thing's happening, and have someone that gets back to you, even if they don't pick up. These are the guys they'll shoot you a text back.
Sure.
Which, if you're in it on a show, even a text could be what makes or breaks that whole
It-
show.
this this is a pretty important differential we're speaking of here, so
Yeah.
I get it. I know with the Avid folks, and that Ryan Ojon is that guy for them, and
Yeah.
he tends to jump right to and sort problems out pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's invaluable. I mean, it's priceless, really.
Yeah.
When you're in the heat, and to be able to trust on customer support and a thing like that. I want to ask you about around 2012. We mentioned Prairie Sun, but which is a recording studio. That's Muka over there, I believe.
Yeah.
Muka's running that thing, and he stepped out a little bit, and I believe you helped him with this, step out into what is now called Prairie Sound Live.
Prairie Sun Live.
Yeah, I talked about it.
So
Talk to
that
us about
was that was early 2012 we started that. And the studio, like, it's been there since, I think, late 70s, early 80s profile, because at that time that was like the easiest way to do a large scale multi-track recording.
It's a very utilitarian desk. It can
So-
cover a lot of bases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for a studio, it kind of made sense. And
Yeah.
at the end of my internship, we had briefly talked about pushing it into like a full scale live sound company. Didn't really work out. And then Muka kept researching over the next, because I wrapped my internship up in 2010. So the next year and a half, 2 years. And I guess, it was maybe a year later, he calls me up and he's like, hey, I just bought this Adamson, PA used from some company in Canada. It's shipping to our buddies in Vegas for a big New Year's show, and then we get it.
Wow.
He's like, if you want to come out to Vegas, these guys will give us a rundown on it, and then you can come out and run the company.
Yeah.
Came out there, it all seemed legit, and so I think it was like a month later, it would have been like March of 2012, I moved out, and we started Prairie Sun Live pretty much from the ground up.
It started with a nice Adamson rig. I mean, as a boutique
Oh,
company
yeah.
goes, I have not run across bad Adamson yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, like, to this day, still one of my favorite PAs.
Yeah, they do well.
Definitely some stuff with the rigging and whatnot. You see the age on it, but just the sound quality of it was just like.
That's what counts.
And getting to have something like that, even though it was a small one, as like a starting regional company, it was just a killer system to be able to throw out for some of these little festivals. So
That's really great. Good
When
for
did you guys get the D&B set up?
You're rolling DMB over at Prairie Sun Live?
yeah,
Sweet.
so that's what we ended up upgrading to. So I think we had the Adamson for close to 2 years, and then we got into a D&B Q rig, and it was just that step up to D&B and just the integration of where D&B's workflow is going with the DSP and just
Yeah.
everything else, because it's like the box to box, like the Adamson was probably the better box, but because of like the age, you're not getting all these DSP options
That's
and
right.
massive array tweaking that you get with these newer systems, and the Q is just new enough to give you a little bit of that. And then it just ended up being the price point was killer. Like, it was, as far as rider friendliness, like
Sure.
being able to throw D&B on
Yeah.
on the list, especially being a regional company. So I think after we got our first batch, we ended up phasing out the Adamson within like a year and going all D&B Qs. And then within like a year or two of that, we ended up adding a J rig. And between those two, it was like you had the nice little compact line array that could do, small and mid size, and then that J rig would take you up to most most decent sized venues. So
Yeah, no, Killer DMB is a great brand, and they make some great product. And yeah, you can't really go too wrong with them.
yeah, I mean,
You
it
know,
was
for the
killer PA to have, especially
Yeah.
like I said, having it for like these little wineries and corporate events, having a system that, because
That's more than enough system, I would imagine.
yeah, and it's
yeah.
just, but having that fidelity, because
Yeah.
they make even these little stick boxes and stuff, or you can modify it to handle these smaller setups. And it was like, when your competition is people out there with little self-powered stuff, it's just like it's
Yeah.
not even competition anymore.
That's right. You wipe them right out. I wanted to ask you about. So I've had a little interaction with this, not personally mixing, but watching engineers at different regional festivals here deal with the Wu-Tang Clan, which great act. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
they're special. They're beloved. But man, do they pose challenges for the engineer? What was your experience like with the Wu-Tang Clan?
It was super throw and go. I think we were in
Really?
Detroit. Yeah, no sound check. I don't know if we might have gotten a couple earlier in the day, but you figure, with however many guys they had come out that day,
Yeah.
like 9 or 10 of them showed up, there would have been some sort of like, oh yeah, we're going to check. They showed up late, and it was, all right, there's 10 mics coming on stage live. We don't know who has which one. Turn it on. And I mean, it's like, luckily those guys are killer performers, but it was definitely like that first song or two was just like,
Working it out.
just really getting it, because they're not all, those guys aren't all exactly the same technique. So it's
No.
like you're definitely sitting there like getting a ballpark, paste it over, and then fine tune everyone. But I mean, I think it was a high times event in Detroit, and we had 12,000 people there, and they were headlining. So I mean, it was just a killer show. But definitely like, I could see having the sound check and all that for them would definitely be
Would've been-
advantageous. Like,
Sure. You could just kind of imagine the benefits of that. I did a show recently where I somewhat found myself bad mouthing, and we're going to talk about that beautiful animal in a minute. Some of the schools that are out there nowadays, and I think maybe I can be a little harsh on that, and I got to check my own opinions on it. It's good once in a while to reflect and self-analyze, and make sure you're not being too big of a dick. And I know that you personally went to the College of Recording Arts, and my question to you regarding that is, can you tell us if there's an advantage to going to something like the College of Recording Arts and acquiring a music degree from them? Has it helped you in your career? Or maybe not. Is it? Tell us what you think. What the benefits of something like that.
I definitely think it's like
Benny.
unique to each person. Because like for me, I definitely grew up playing music, but it was in a very small rural town in Texas, and I didn't really have a lot of connections to the industry as far as something that would really put me in it. So for me, it was a really good sort of first step to get a better just idea of what going into the industry would be.
Sure.
But I mean, I worked live events and like little production gigs the whole time I was there. So I felt like for me, I got a really good mix of like, here's the real world version of it, and here's your classroom stuff. And you can kind of, integrate it right away. Whereas I think a lot of people go through it and they don't necessarily have that opportunity to see the real world application right away. And
Sure.
you get a lot of people that get the book smarts. And we all know it's like, it goes back to like, the whole just being thrown into it. It's like, you really cut your teeth on like actually doing it. So I don't regret going to school. I don't feel like it was a waste, but at this point, I would say that, 80, 90% of my career is based off what I actually did after it. Like it was a
Yeah.
great
So maybe like a
stepping
primer,
stone, yeah.
a little bit of a primer for what you did, but
Yeah.
really the learning. And I think tends to be my point is really had in the field, in the shop, in the field, in the preps, in the restores, in the show, in the doing.
Yeah. And I think I was lucky enough to have, instructors and people around me when I was there that definitely pushed like, this is just a learning tool. You're going to have to get out there and prove yourself and really learn it. So I didn't come out of there like, oh, I have a degree, like, hand me some high-end gig.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, because I've definitely like, especially being at a studio for a while and watching interns come through, it's like there is a different generation that's coming out of these schools, and some of them do have this like hotshot attitude, and it's interesting. So I think it's tough because it's unique to each person. So,
Sure.
but I mean, I would say, like, especially looking at what I did, like, I would tell people, see what you can do, like, based on people you know, like, do it through a venue or something. Because, I mean, the toughest part with those schools is how expensive they are.
They are not cheap.
You know, I spent a good portion of the last 10 years, like, throwing money back into those debts. So it's like,
Right.
but I think for, like I said, for some people, there's not really an option for them to get into the industry any other way. So it's like, if you got the money, it's like, you know, just know that that's just kind of your intro. It's not.
Maybe it's a
Not
case
like
by
a-
case, you know,
yeah.
like you said, you know, some of us have came up a different way where it was a hands-on right from the gate. You
Yeah.
kind of just stayed behind at the shows and started helping push cases, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That networking part is huge with school.
It really is, and I've seen that, and I've seen the benefit. I've seen some benefits of it. I think where I get discouraged is the part where he mentioned is about the larger debt that's accrued, and then
100%.
sometimes the false sense. There's almost, in some cases, and in this case by case, a sense of okay, I got this. I'm here now. I'm in a building. Somebody can hand me a board and put me on it, you know, up
Right.
front, and it's like, well, go grab the L21 and you fix me this NL8 first. And they're like, what is that and where does that live? And
Right.
And then I just, everything in me is just shattered. And I feel like I got to pick you up from the ground and take
Yeah.
you through the process to where, before I'm ever going to put you out front of anything on a board.
Yeah.
And so I think I've come up by this emotion, this feeling, this experience with these things. And then I'm concerned about the accruing these debts when you could be here working here with us, getting paid to learn from some of the best, to within a similar period of time that you would be in school, you would be in the field.
Yeah.
But being paid that whole time. So there's this, for me, I struggle with it a little bit, but at the same time, we have had some guys. It's a tricky one for me. Anyways, I think your point is well taken, and that it's a case by case thing.
Yeah.
And there's many different ways to skin a cat, I guess, is really the bottom line. I mentioned the dog, your beautiful, sweet dog, Dan. It's Danzo.
Danzo, yeah.
Danzo, he is I believe, I want to say our sixth canine visitor on the show, and I like that very much. I am not much of a pet person myself, but they bring something special. And Danzo, of all of them, we've had a couple real neurotic, bouncy, trouncy, different versions of animals on the show. Danzo has some kind of a deep Barry White cool going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like he's trained up. This is a real show dog. This is the guy that sits under the front of house when you're pushing 110 out of, you know,
He's
STL.
a good wiggly butt.
Yeah.
Good wiggly
And
butt.
you love him. I had to say, can we please just mic everybody up? You were loving on him, and I know
Oh man,
you
we
got
keep him around. That's the only way Trev ever gets females in his life. Is this lovely one.
Send
My
him out
wife
the
is
phone
going to
number.
say you're being mean. So he's sorry,
sorry,
honey. We're just
Jackie.
playing. We're just playing. No, he does well, I'm sure, by himself. Danzo has an interesting backstory, though. This was last year-ish, sometime not that long ago. Danzo turns up missing. And it became a federal project. Talk to us about that, because that was a really involved thing. That kind of sucked.
Yeah, it was a rough 2 weeks. That was back in June.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was out. I think some of the state parks and stuff had just opened again, and so I guess it was National Forest, so it was outside of Bakersfield in Sequoia National Forest, and yeah, we'd been out there like a day or so, and he was out there sort of wandering around, and had him in places like that before, and he's been real good about, like, he'll go on his little adventure, and some buddies up north, in California, he'll wander out for an hour and then still make it back to the cabin. So, wasn't that worried about him, and he just didn't come back.
Wow. 2 weeks, you say?
Ended up being 2 weeks
Oh, my God.
that he was gone. Had a lot of really good help. Kyle actually came out with his girlfriend and helped us out for 3 or 4 days. And then another one of our buddies came back after that. And yeah, I mean, it was.
You
it
did
was
the
quite
flyers and
trek.
the whole bit, I hear.
Flyers. I mean, at one point we had the
I saw you had a bunch of
director-
stuff on Facebook.
Yeah, we were posting everywhere. And I mean, the local community out there was like just unbelievably just understanding, super helpful, like all sorts of stories about like other dogs that had been lost for weeks. I think there was one even, they said, I don't think it was out in Sequoia, but it was like a friend of theirs had lost a dog for 2 months.
Wow.
And it ended up being like found in a cave or something, and it had been like killing deer and surviving.
Oh,
like,
amazing.
so it was like definitely like a lot of positive vibes that helped, like just helped us make it through. But yeah, the night before he got found,
He knows you're telling his story.
We were supposed to go down to the oh buddy. We were supposed to go down to the local airport because the director of the airport had actually seen one of our flyers and they wanted to take us up in a plane
Wow.
to try and fly over that section of the mountain. But yeah, tons of support, and he ended up just wandering in front of like two guys' cars like late one night. It was like the 13th day he was out there, and he happened to have his collar hadn't fallen off, and my number was on there, and these guys had a satellite phone, so they were able to hit us up. And next morning we booked it up the mountain and got him back, and he was a little beat up. He'd lost like 10, 15 pounds, but
Yeah.
you know, it didn't seem to really affect him too much. He's back to his old mellow self. So
Yeah, he seems like he's
and
doing
I mean,
great.
like you said, like he's been the show dog pretty much since he was about 3 months old. So
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good stories about him on the shows, and then seen him in the shop here, and he's just so well behaved and such a sweetheart, and that's a nice thing to see. And we're grateful that that all worked out so well for you, because I know he's an important part of your life.
He's coming over to say hi to you.
He's just trying to say hi, see what's up, you know, checking in.
right.
So let's talk about you mixing for Cypress Hill. How did you? Well, first of all, my question: I've worked with Cypress Hill on multiple occasions, festival situations, and how did you mix them through the smoke? I mean, how did you see them through all the marijuana smoke?
that was a tough one, especially because the show we did was a 420 show, and I want to say they played at 420 on 420.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was another sort of just like chaotic festival sort of situation, but just, you know, a lot of fun, super pro guys. You know, those guys definitely make it easy. I've had a few little like sit-ins at some of the other festivals, like working with them when they've been traveling with their guys, but you know, just super high energy. And you know, I think we've talked about this before. It's like they're just a little more unique having that whole percussion setup up there. It's
Yeah,
it's
nice.
you know,
Yeah.
a little different than your typical, you know, rap and hip hop set.
That's right.
And it's just people just love them. Like, especially, I don't know, I don't think you were there that year when they played at Cali Roots, but it's just like, you know, even just a bunch of reggae fans, it's like whatever it is, like it's like everyone knows the whole set. And it's like
They're total professionals. Be real, and the boys they bring it hard. There's a melodic quality to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a kind of got this weird crossover. You know, the OGs can get down with it and feel it in their heart. The white kids can be totally up with it, like you said. The reggae,
Yeah.
You know, they operate in a very special lane that they've honed and they own outright. It's their lane. And then of course they are the #1 mascots and representatives of the marijuana culture.
Oh, yeah.
And they bring it, and yeah, so I always had fun working with them, and I can imagine that had to be a good time.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You worked for the somewhat legendary Spider Ranch Productions. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that's actually who I've been doing a handful of these drive-in shows with. They've
Yeah.
been keeping me afloat this year. And they were actually the PA provider for the DaBaby run. But
was
yeah,
his
I met
first-
them.
Was that kind of his first big?
I think that was their first like really big like
Yeah.
tour of that level. I know they've done some like West Coast runs and stuff like
Sure.
that. But yeah, I think I met them very like soon after moving out to help start Prairie Sun Live, just through, you know, another engineer buddy or something. So I'd freelanced off and on for them, and that's actually where I met Kyle originally, which was what, 3 years ago, I think now,
Something like
maybe
that, yeah.
4.
So you guys, it's only been that long. I mean, I kind of think of you guys like brothers almost, the way you interact and talk about each other.
we're
Yeah.
good
With
friends.
the
yeah.
hours we put in on everything.
Yeah.
We've
Might count for more.
spent too much time together. It seems like we know too much.
No.
But yeah, I mean, another killer, you know, regional company. They had been Bay Area for a long time, and they
Yeah.
just recently relocated to the Sacramento area.
Yeah.
But
Unusual jump, but I don't know why. To me, that seemed
Yeah.
like an unusual jump, but I guess it made sense for their business model.
working for them, so
Yeah, right. Good for them.
But yeah, you know, just like I said, another killer regional company I've got to work for, and a lot of really cool, interesting gigs. They had a lot of the High Times stuff, and
That's right.
High Times. We got to do Punk and Drublick.
Yeah.
And some interesting travel. Like Kyle got to go up as well. We went to Alaska one year for a High Times event. So yeah, really cool stuff. A lot of festival work. So
Which part of
know.
Alaska did you guys go to?
Wasilla, yeah.
You went to the heart of the beast. You went up to that would be Sarah Palin's neighborhood. Wow. How was that? It's a beautiful country. I mean,
It was
it's-
amazing.
yeah.
I unfortunately was only able to be there for like the show days. Kyle got lucky and was part of the crew that was up there for about a week, I think. And they got to see some pretty amazing stuff. There was like
Ice
some
caves,
ice
Vinny.
caves.
Oh wow!
Fucking ice caves.
Did you run into any moose?
No moose.
Oh man,
We
that's
were
Yeah, there was like
looking-
a surprising
Those
like,
things are
lack of
impressive,
animals,
isn't it?
right?
Right? That was like the one thing where like
guys
we
had to
never
go to
run
a
into
farm?
an
Where are the
animal.
Where are
You
the
guys had to go
moose?
to a moose farm or something like that.
We went to a reindeer farm. That's the only
Right on.
time we saw
Those
an
are
animal.
impressive animals as well. Some of those can get
They're
pretty
kind of creepy.
Yeah,
Shed
you wouldn't
their
want to
little-
tangle with them, and moose will put you in your grave. But they're at a safe distance. They're quite a spectacle. It's
Yeah.
quite something to see. With
That's
giant.
funny you bring that up. I got that picture of one of our buddies, Michael Rebello, kissing this moose.
That's right.
How the hell did he pull that off? Yeah, was it
I
a
got the
mounted
picture.
moose?
Oh no,
it's
this is a
real.
live
He was
moose.
making out with a real moose. That's impressive.
It just came up on my phone.
We get Michael on the show and talk about that for an hour.
Yeah,
That'd be an interesting one. Now I know you just mentioned you've done some travel in your work, which is my favorite. When I was in the heart of the work, really out there putting it out, I love to travel.
Oh, yeah.
Even with some of the challenges that go with it. But the travel makes it's an added. It's a thing, a lot. I think I've always thought that reading combats, fascism, and travel combats racism. It's when you get to see other people's and other ways of doing things.
These guys weren't like full blown island time, but it definitely wasn't like, step to it,
Yeah.
right on the dot productions. But going into it, it's like another sort of friend of a friend thing. Was like, hey, there's this festival over here. You should hit these guys up. Because I've been, I think, like 3 or 4 years now going over there just for vacation. I've got some friends that live there full time. So made this connection. They're like, yeah, we actually do need someone to take over front of house. And I think I was told what board I was mixing on, and that was like about as big an advance I got, like before hopping on the plane. It was like, yeah, we're paying for your flight, all your lodging, and here's your pay for the show itself. But it was like, sure, I'll come back to Bali for another 2 weeks, like.
Hell yeah.
And overall, I was actually really impressed with like the production. Started on a Allen and Heath D-Live S7000,
It's a very serviceable board.
which overall I was quite surprised for
Yeah.
that location.
Yeah.
And then ended up having to move to a Midas Pro 2 due to the Allen and Heath not being able to handle the rainforest humidity.
There's humidity issues on islands, and there's electricity issues on
Yes.
islands. That's
The electricity-
always the things you're dealing with.
I don't know what was happening with it. I
Yeah.
don't know that we had any issues, but when I saw what I assume was the distro, it was a little scary. Like I was like, if you guys say this works and my stuff works, I'm not even gonna ask because this does not look like it would fly anywhere
Full
else.
fire hazard in
Yeah.
effect. It's part of it, man. That is part. You should sue South America, Central and South America.
Oh, yeah.
Man, the shit they get away with, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And these are not small shows. Some of these
Yeah.
South American, Central American shows you do in these soccer stadiums, and you look at the power setups, and you look the way they've got their shit tied off, and this is from flying the speakers to
Oh,
stacking
yeah.
the stubs. I mean, like it's some like somebody's gonna die thing,
Yeah.
and somehow you do the thing, and everybody goes
does?
home safe,
Right.
and it's kind of like. Okay, they must know something I don't know. Maybe we're just overly, cautious in our. And
Yeah.
They save some money on the D-grade bolts.
They definitely. There's corners that get cut, let's say, compared to the way that we've been trained to be mindful in approaching, interacting with the public with high voltage and heavy weight.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I found it interesting that you've worked with and mixed Randy Newman, and, really a guy that's got this incredible. First of all, he's an amazing writer and an incredible pianist, and he's been in the game as long as I can remember, before me, and probably will be after. Who knows? But what was it like working with Randy Newman?
It was super cool. I mean, I didn't, obviously knew that dude was super legendary, but didn't quite know what to expect.
Yeah,
He's up there now. Like,
yeah.
it's
He's
like
not a
you
young
see
man.
you see him come out for the sound check and everything, and it's like, dude, you're up there. And then as soon as he starts playing, it's just like could be 20 years ago. Like,
Yeah, I
he just
believe
still
that.
rips.
Yeah, total
But-
consummate professional.
You know, just super solid set. He goes. The interesting thing I found is, you know, he comes in for what 10-minute sound check or something. You know, it's him and a piano, nothing too crazy.
Sure.
But you know, I think he had a super particular like mics, you know, that he wanted on the piano and his vocal and all that. I'm sitting there like, all right, this guy's old. He probably needs it loud. Like, so I get like his vocal and the piano just like ripping in his wedges.
Yeah.
And he comes up and he's like, I got the piano right here. I don't need to hear that. So it's like, kill it. And he just wants his vocals here. And he just uses the straight piano which is, you know, it's great to see guys that'll actually like.
Well, it sounds like
Like,
he's
dude,
taking
I
care
can
of his
hear it right
ears.
here, yeah.
His hearing is still intact.
But yeah, you know, super killer set. All the classics. I want to say he may have accidentally played one song twice
Possible.
at one point.
That
Like I was
could
sitting
happen.
out there in front of house and I was like, I'm pretty sure we just heard this like 2 songs ago. And I was like, I don't know if he just like does it as like a reprise or if he just like forgot his set list and played it again.
It could have been a half dozen, one and six of the
I mean,
other.
at that point, it's like you can do whatever you want. Like
He's Randy
like,
Newman. You know what I mean? Like
no one's gonna complain about hearing the song
I
twice.
don't think
like,
so. Yeah, and I mean, he's just got his catalog is just chock full of hits, and
Yeah.
you know, like moments in time, really. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I remember him early, must have been 75-ish as a young man, and his song "Short People." And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we just got the biggest kick out of that at the time. You know, it was a very novelty kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then he went on to do all the writing for stuff like Toy Story and all
Mm-hmm.
these other things, and he's just that guy. You know,
Yeah.
he's prolific and he's still around, and the respect just has to go out to that. You know?
yeah.
Mixing for bands like Randy Newman or Arrested Development or the true OG that is E40. I was curious, what's the difference, if any, from mixing rap versus rock and roll? Is there an approach difference that you take with it when you come to it?
I mean, a little bit like what I touched on earlier with like the DaBaby stuff. It's very, for most of the rap, you know, you're dealing with tracks or minimal instrumentation. Like even with Cypress Hill, like it's tracks and a percussion setup. So you're definitely making sure that vocal, you know, pops up over the top. And then, I mean, I would say after touring with DaBaby, one of the big things I found is even if it is a simpler setup, there's a lot that goes into dialing the system for the room, because it's like, yeah, it might be super simple stuff coming off the board where the show's easy, but it's like if you don't have that rig dialed, and I mean, it's getting clarity, and obviously they want to hear and feel that low end punch.
That's right.
And then, you know, the bands, it's like you're dealing with who knows how many inputs these days. I mean, it could be 48. I feel like it's starting to turn into a small input list
Yeah.
for some of these big bands.
Yeah.
And you could be in triple digits these days.
That's
so
right.
it's just, and I mean, that goes back to like the ease of some of these consoles now and the customization is it makes 120 tracks a very reasonable, you know, thing to deal with now.
Doable.
Yeah. It's just, it makes a lot more sense. You can kind of get a better grasp, but yeah, I mean, I'd say track count is one of the biggest things. And, you know, it's not necessarily just the rap, but, you know, a handful of these genres, you're able to push that low end on a whole other level. Whereas like, you know, you're doing rock or a full band. It's like, yeah, you want that punch, but can't be overwhelmed by that. You know, you got other instruments that are sitting in there.
That's correct.
And I mean, I'd say one of the more interesting things with the mixing the bands over the years is really seeing, you know, what bands understand the way that they sit in the mix, and they shape their tone based on that, or the guys that just go up and turn up and go for it, and you're the one carving out space.
Right.
Because
We've
it's like
discussed it a lot, just having like going up on stage and listening to how the drum kit sounds before you start tweaking.
Oh yeah,
on it.
I mean that's like just one of the with any of it, you know, the drum kit, the guitar rig, whatever. It's like, you know, you get such a jump by hearing like what does it actually sound like, because you could be up there like, you know, assuming it sounds like this and that's why the mic sounds like this now, and trying to make it sound a certain way, and you go up there and you're like, oh, like this guy's drum kit's not in tune, or
Yeah, you're fighting
whatever it might be, and it's like you could just go up and change the mic or move the mic and, you know, have a whole different ball game.
Mic placement is so critically
Oh,
important.
yeah.
I mean, that is in many ways the ball game.
I mean, some
certainly
of the
making your
best
job
guys
easier.
I've watched, and I mean, you've been there for Thievery Corporation.
Oh, a few times, yeah.
That guy, it's, you know, it's none of the bullshit of like, oh, we're using all these mics because we're endorsed. Like, he has completely different mics on one guitar rig versus the other. Like, but then you go look at his show file, and it's like maybe one notch filter and a little bit of high pass and low pass action, and like that's it. Like he's not,
Simplicity
and it's
itself.
like it's because he goes through and actually like picks
Right.
his mics correctly,
Sure.
and he just gets this killer sound. So, yeah, the what was it Arrested Development? That was another one that was with Kyle, and I think that was on the Alaska run, and that was probably, I would say the tough thing with the bands is the fact that you're dealing with stuff that you don't have control of the level directly.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas like rap, it's like, okay, yeah, you're gonna have the monitor wedges, but that's only gonna get so loud, and you're kind of getting the back end of that. So it's like, but all of a sudden you get 3 or 4 guitar rigs, you know, some dual SVTs or something up there, and a drummer. And I mean,
Trying to
that
corral
one we
that.
did was in a tent.
Yeah,
Quite
110
possibly one of the-
dB in a tarped roof. It was fun.
Yeah, quite possibly one of the loudest stage volumes I think either one of us have been on.
Wow.
I think that's
Low key, like good vibe festival, and they you know, it's traditionally kind of a reggae festival, and it started with some of the newer sort of pop and Cali reggae stuff, but at this point they do a pretty diverse lineup. You know, we've had Barrington Levy out there. Who else? Steel Pulse.
Yeah, I saw Steel Pulse do it. Yeah.
I don't think we ever had Toots out there, but you know, they go all the way from the old school guys to, you know, these bands that are popping up, you know, reggae bands that are popping up in, you know, Missouri and stuff like that. So they really try to get it all in. And then recently we've even been getting into like some of the rap stuff, and like we had E40, we've had Atmosphere.
No kidding.
But yeah, super chill festival. They keep it like, I think it's a pretty reasonable size, like 12,000 people a day or something like that. 'Cause Monterey Fairgrounds, which that in itself is really cool because just super legendary fairgrounds to be at.
It's the place where festivals started, they
Yeah,
say.
I mean, there's totally a vibe there just
That's right.
with all the history. So
Yeah, you can still see, well, it may be covered by now, but I remember in our days doing shows there, which we've done quite a few. You could see the burn mark where Jimmy did his guitar trick, and
at least the first few years we were there, that was still there.
yeah,
So.
yeah, and it just you know, knowing that the Who played their first American show there,
Yeah.
and the famous Otis Redding set, and it's just one of those places, kind of like the Warfield, where just the building just has so much
Yeah.
stored up tradition and history in it. It can't help but kind of pick that up and want to do it justice. I know you mentioned earlier you have done a batch of the Emerald Cups. Those provide, you know, they're fun. The idea with it obviously is a little different than kind of doing a BFD type
Yeah.
festival. Obviously, you're dealing with the stoners, and there's a lot of weed in the mix, and the music is. Talk to us about your impression of doing, and is that an enjoyable event for you?
It's definitely enjoyable. It's probably one of the more intricate events I did, and I think we did, I want to say 6 years of it, maybe 7.
Yeah.
And that one had originally been like super small, you know, hippie festival way up north in the Emerald Triangle.
Right.
And I think they would, you know, bring out little stick systems and local bands would come out. And so we took over when they like went to like, you know, the big boy route and started doing it at the fairgrounds in Santa Rosa.
Right.
And I want to say we brought in like Revolution, J-Boog, Steel Pulse. Like they
Wow.
brought in some pretty big reggae acts that first year. But it went from being something with maybe 1,200 people to I think they were pushing 3,000 to 4,000 that first year. And yeah, like you said, it's super interesting, especially the early years, just because of you have just the stoner culture putting on what is like a huge event. And so
Yeah.
there was definitely some, you know, some learning and stumbling and sort of getting like the pro level on.
Right.
And eventually they ended up getting like merging with a larger production company. I want to say it was Red Light Management bought into the part of the festival, and they brought on some killer production crews to sort of facilitate from the East Coast.
Yeah.
And once we got to that level, it was just super pro. I mean, it's another one I got to do with Kyle this last year. And I mean, as far as the setup we had to do, I think it was 2 band stages, a DJ setup, and then there was something like 4 playback areas where they could either have just ambient music or if it was near one of the stages, they'd want to hear whatever was on that stage in
Sure.
that vendor area or lounge area. And then sometimes, like, if like Kyle's stage was on, but my stage was on a changeover, they'd want his stage to be the changeover music on my stage.
Oh, wow.
So it turned into this, and like half of it was decisions the festival guys made,
On-
like the week of
on the
setup.
fly.
Like,
Yeah.
which
It's
we'd
always
done this
fun.
one enough that we knew stuff like that would happen. So we,
Right.
for the most part, had the resources we needed. But geez, I don't know if I've ever run so much Cat 5 and XLR. Like, it was a combination of Cat 5, XLR, and FM broadcasts
Man.
to cover this whole festival grounds. And I mean, I think they had the guy who does the Voice of God for Coachella's out there doing like Voice of God for that. So it's
Right.
like we had to have the whole like let him take over the whole system
Of
button,
course,
and
of
it was
course.
just, quite the setup. But building that on the fly was just like
Labor
you know.
intensive, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
luckily, they provide plenty of hands and stuff, but it's definitely one of those, like you said, there's a bit of that stoner, like, well, what if?
The approach
And it's
is a
like-
little. I just had a brilliant idea, but it sounds like you stepped up to the challenge and kicked its ass.
I mean, yeah, I love getting, shows like that, especially like at this point doing it, for roughly over like a decade now. It's like anything like that, it's just, it's a little crazy, but it's always fun to just have a new challenge and get to like walk away having like crushed it. So
Gotcha.
I will say one of my favorite stoner moments from that show was totally when we were bringing the PA down in the barn, right? Mm-hmm. And the guy's looking at it, he's staring at it like this, man, with his arms crossed. He goes, "So how's that thing rigged there?" And he sees the two pieces of tie line coming out, and he goes, "So is all the weight on the tie line?" And I look at my patch dude, and I was like, "No, man, we didn't bring the load-bearing tie line today." You just hear half the room start dying.
Load-bearing tie line. I'm sorry, that's very funny to me.
It was priceless.
made out of hemp.
Yeah, well,
made
that
out of
stuff's
hemp,
very strong, very strong, and then you can smoke it when you're done with the show, and so
Right.
there's that. Real quickly, talk to us about working with the Punk and Drublic.
Super fun show.
Yeah.
I think I did 2 years of that, and that was actually the show I believe Kyle and I met on.
Yeah, I think so.
But a bunch of old school punk rockers.
Yeah,
That's NoFX's festival.
yeah,
And
we've done it.
first year we did it, I think, was when they had the first really bad fires in Santa Rosa. So that was an interesting one to work around that. I think we actually got out of doing like a back-to-back, something like rap at 2 a.m., load in the next show at 6 a.m. type of thing. So that was the one advantage of the delay. But, the thing that surprised me the most, because, I mean, that's a lot of the music I grew up on,
Right.
is that era of punk, was you don't necessarily associate, like, high-end production with that type of music.
Yeah.
And, like, for the most part, it was, like, super pro production.
That's
like,
right.
most of the bands actually had engineers. I think the thing that, like, blew me away the most was, what was it, Flogging Molly had something like 3 different makes of wedges on stage.
No kidding.
Like, one dude needed D&B wedges, another, section of the band wanted L acoustic, and someone else wanted it was like I'd never seen, and they were carrying all of it.
No
Like,
shit.
it was just like,
Impressive.
but I mean, they killed it. Like, super,
Yeah.
great show. But yeah, it was, that's another one where it's cool seeing like just the age range that comes out to those, because you have old school guys that came up on the punk even before, NoFX and Bad Religion, all the way to like, there's like 12-year-old kids out there.
Yeah,
Like,
it's the whole gamut of humanity. It's the one.
Nothing like doing a show and having Fat Mike come out and stand next to you doing monitors in a dress. Let me tell you.
Fat Mike's heavy cat. So this year you went from. Let me just sum this up. We wrap here. This year you went from an arena tour to the pandemic shutdown to mixing and learning from the house to drive-in shows. With your time in the job and in the game, where do you think the industry's heading?
I mean, it's hard to say at this point. I think we're all hoping it's going to be back sooner. I'm thinking that right now that everyone's got a good grasp on some of these streaming options, like what you guys are doing here. A lot of the drive-ins have been tweaked to the point where they have like a rough idea of like, hey, we can do this safely, we can do it in a budget that kind of works. And so I think we're gonna hopefully when we get out of the winter and everything, it'll be, we'll come into. I think it's gonna be more drive-ins and streaming is what we're coming back to early next year. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you guys saw it. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago now. Live Nation put out that article saying like we
Yeah.
expect to be doing full-fledged shows by summer, which is like, yeah, I think we'd all love to do that, but it's like it's just there's a lot at play right now. So I mean,
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is knowing that it's probably going to be really different for a while, and it's like adapting to that change and kind of knowing like probably won't be like this forever, but it's like we got to just figure it out and go with the flow for what's going to pay the bills for now and know.
Good Thanksgiving, and thank you very much
Yeah,
for
happy
bringing
Thanksgiving.
Danzo out and yourself. Much love, brother.
Yeah, thanks guys.
You
Thanks,
bet,
man.
brother. Hey, a quick shout out to go over to EAW Users Group. It's a great page on Facebook. It's super fun, and if you haven't checked it out yet, please check out the guys over at Signal to Noise Podcast. Kyle, Michael, and Chris over there putting on good shows. They've got a hell of a collection of some very interesting guests. You might want to check in on them. I'd like to send some love to Sweet Treatments and the great Jackie Carcetti for a bunch of work she's done for us recently and that we've done together over the many years. She's a wonderful woman. Steve Orgain from Chef's Touch. He fed us lunch today. He's the sweetest guy in the business and is the caterer to the stars. Please send check them out if you ever need that
Such
type of
a
a service.
gentleman.
Isn't he the greatest guy?
Love
I
that
love
guy.
that guy. And then our good friends over at Loving Hands for Stagehands. They're providing a hell of a service to people that in our industry that maybe are struggling with the times that we find ourselves in. You might want to go over there and check them out. They've got good vibes. There's good people, like-minded thinking that might have some advice for you or a place you can express yourself. And one last thing, the Big Love Army, which is Lauren Monroe and Rick Allen's page. It's a great page for positive thinking and sweet thoughts. You might want to check into that. We appreciate you very much. You guys are amazing. Thanks for tuning in on this special day. We wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. And we hope to see you again next week, Thursday at 7 p.m. with a new guest. You'll see when we see. See you then. Thank you so much for tuning in. Good night.